Well, welcome to Break Time Off the Shelf.
Thank you.
We're super excited to have Jenny today here as our first guest on our show.
First guest.
Yeah. One of our favorite all-time clients. We're at Break Time obviously always focused on what's happening in the commerce space, and we wanted to kind of pull this content series together to talk about commerce and the amazing humans that kind of make things happen in this ecosystem. So excited to be here and have you on the show. Josh Ginsberg, CEO here at Break Time.
And I'm Brad Godwin, the EVP of CPG and Retail Partnerships, and our first guest.
Yeah.
I'll let you do your intro, Jenny.
I'm honored to be the first. Wow, I didn't realize I was the first one. Jenny Echeverri. So I lead our Omni-Channel Strategy at Reckitt currently for our Walmart team. But I've been hanging with these guys for a long time. We won't say how long because I don't want to age myself or anyone else in the room, but for a long time we've been. So I think I've been in a few different companies as we've all worked together over the years. But
I think that's one of the things, hopefully, as we were talking and dreaming about content and what are the stories of retail and CPG and what are the trends, but really it all comes down to the people, right? And I think back to a quote that Doug McMillan has been coined for is we're going to be a human tech empowered organization, right? Human led, tech empowered. And I think that so often in this industry right now is there's a lot of things around products, right? There's a lot of things around tech, but ultimately why we're sitting in a room today is because of people. Yeah. It's because of the relationships, right? Because at the end of the day, we have products and we have consumers and we have a retailer that is kind of that conduit to bring those together. And so excited to kind of get to hear your perspective on some things and have a great conversation. So.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I would just add on that, obviously being in this market, Brad, where we're hometown folks here in Northwest Arkansas, but it is a small market, relatively a small little world, but the network of humans that work in this space are I would say second to none. I mean, obviously we all work across the country with teams a little bit of everywhere, but it's a pretty cool place to be in Northwest Arkansas.
Totally. As an outsider who doesn't live here, it's been amazing. Yeah. I've been coming down for 12 plus years now, and it's been amazing just to see the growth and the change. But I would say that amazing, empathetic, just community has embraced us and me since the beginning. And so it's been amazing to see the development and everything happening down here in Northwest Arkansas over the past 12 plus years. It just gets better and better and builds, but the amazing people definitely are at the core of it. Now, you've been in many different roles over those 12 years, but I guess to start, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your current role today at Reckitt and kind of what you're focused on.
Sure. Yeah. So it's been interesting because I came over to Reckitt a couple of years ago. I guess officially yesterday might have been 2 years.
Okay.
It just like Happy the day goes on and you don't think about it, but I think it was yesterday, I want to say, but yeah, so the last 2 years, when they brought me over, it was a new role they were creating on the Walmart team. And it was really around like trying to bring together the e-commerce space, not just from an e-commerce sales, which we kind of already had that function as a part of the company, but more of like making all the connections from a total omni perspective, right? Because we had still at that time sort of an e-commerce business unit. So it was still a bit disconnected and we didn't have that like true omni sort of structure. And so my role was meant to kind of come in and start to connect more of the pieces and start to build more of an omni specific strategy. The majority of my career, as you guys know, because we've worked together for so long, was really in the shopper marketing space and which of course, as e-commerce has grown, is a huge part of shopper marketing. And so I've always had a lot of that experience, whether it's with retail media or just driving, online purchasing. But in the last 5 years, with COVID accelerating digital commerce and then e-commerce growth at the magnitude that it is, companies have had to kind of rethink the structures and the, functionality and the ways of working. And so, so when I came in, it was originally on our hygiene side of our business, which is our, like Lysol finish or sort of our household cleaning. And then my role has expanded over the course of the 2 years to be our total Reckitt core business, which includes our health and personal care brands as well. And it's also become much more about driving e-commerce growth and more of the e-commerce strategy. Activation is an enabler of that. So I do a lot less in this role than maybe in my past life of the shopper marketing and the building marketing plans and activations and executing. But it's more about what's that strategy to drive the growth within the e-commerce and the digital commerce channels. And then what are the right enablers, and how do I then, go to our cross-functional teams that are building those activation plans and make sure that we are building plans that are going to enable that growth. So that's what my team is focused on, is really what are the growth opportunities. We're looking at every single channel as we think about Walmart, right? There's 4 major channels that we're looking at. And then what is the opportunity for growth in each of the channels? How are we stacking up to our competition? Are we driving or draining the category's total growth at Walmart, right? And so that's what my team spends a lot of time just in the data, looking at how are we measuring up, and then, how much potential is there, and then what are the right enablers to, to drive that growth. Yeah. Cool. It's been a fun, different challenge, obviously. And I would say nobody really fully has this figured out, right? Even Walmart would probably tell you they're still trying to figure it out. And Walmart is poised, though, for growth. Like, that is where the growth is coming from, is e-commerce. But it's still a matter of playing a bit of catch up as you think about true e-commerce retailers in the market. That's how they were built, and that's their model, and everything was built around that model. Walmart was a brick and mortar retailer who's now become an omni-channel retailer, and there's a lot of, adaptations that have to happen within their ways of working, their systems, all those things. And I think they've made huge strides in the last, 3 years.
For sure.
And we're seeing that coming through in the growth. I'm sure everyone, not just Reckitt, but I would say probably everyone you talk to is going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
We're all seeing tremendous growth in the space. And then if you're able to do some really great things to enable that, you might see more of that growth than others. But I think we're all benefiting from just a lot of that organic growth that's happening from Walmart's investments they're making, from just the nature of how shoppers are shifting, right? So there's a lot of that. But yeah.
It feels like they're and correct me if you think differently, but that in your role now, you're kind of a conduit, right? Like, you're having to bring together, whether it's sales, traditional brand, marketing, channel strategy, category, to try to build this synergistic with lots of touch points at Walmart too, right? It's not just maybe the merchant, it might be side ops and all of these other teams, Walmart Connect, right? Like, so it's, I think with the growth of Walmart as an ecosystem, it's also, there's a complexity now that didn't necessarily previously exist a decade ago, right? It was like, oh, I have a product, I go to a line review, you accept the product, here's my deck, okay, we're good, right? Now there's a lot more touch points and a lot more stakeholders that have to be aligned. And so maybe I'll call you the Omni Orchestra director of your bringing together all of these pieces, right? To bring that. And it's easy to talk about here.
Yeah.
Probably a little more difficult day to day to figure out and bring it to life. But is there something that you're maybe over the last few months that you're excited about with your job, or something you're really excited about as you're going into 2026 with your team or things you're working on?
Yeah. And I'll just touch on one thing that you had said, which is like the way that I've described it almost to our internal leadership as we've had new leadership coming in, is that if you think about like the wheel, right? Like, put it in just like the you have all these spokes, and then you have that like center hub. That's really the role that my team plays, is like, we're that center hub, which is like what's what we need to do and the opportunity of that. And then there's all, to your point, all of these teams, whether it's externally with Walmart or it's internally with all of our cross-functional business partners. And so it really is very complex. And it to your point, like, we've adapted as this has all changed, right? So it doesn't seem quite as overwhelming as maybe it could. But if you put it on paper 10 years ago, you described it very well. This is how you go to market, right? Very simple. You have very clear, these are the things you can do. Now it's like almost endless. And you think about all the different opportunities you could chase. I think the thing that I'm most excited about is just access to data, right? As that has increased over the last couple of years. And we have a big partnership with Scintilla, and we use a number of different data sources, but the ability to actually have data that's driving the thinking, the strategy, the actions that you're putting into place is on a level it's never been before in my career, right? And so whereas we would call it educated guessing, and I know Chris would probably laugh. He'll probably see this, I'm sure, from your team, Josh, 10 plus years ago when we were trying to create a formula approach to how we could predict ROI against some of the activations that we were building, right? In the absence of having real data and tracking and some of the, the technology that we have now. So I think that's to me, what I get the most excited about is that we can use data to really inform that we're doing the right things and we're focused on the right things so that we can spend our time and our energy, because it's not, finite. We have so much of it, and it's like we only have so much time and so much energy to chase. So now we can focus it on the right things, and then we can build out activations that we can truly measure to say, did it work? Was it successful? I think that's, we're not 100% to bright even there where I think we need to be, but I think we've made huge strides where everyone feels much more confident when we come forward with a recommendation or we say, this is the opportunity we want to go after.
Totally.
We all feel at least with an 80%, confidence level now, where you couldn't say 10% probably 5-10 years ago, that it will deliver. Right. And I think that is, I would say everyone probably in this space would say resources are always a challenge because it is still a small part of your business as you think about digital from the overall, but it's the fastest growing part of the business and it's the most complex. And so also trying to figure out what is that right structure and model of how we operate and resourcing that you need, and how do you leverage external partnerships versus or you need internal resources. I think that's the fun part right now is just we're kind of designing this and trying to figure out what that organization of the future in the space needs to look like. So I think that's the fun part. And then there's all the other things, right, that are the stressful parts of the job where it's just why isn't something working, and why, we should be winning. Why aren't we? Right.
Totally.
There's always going to be those things that, but I think for me, I'm really excited at where we've come as a industry from a just data and analytics perspective.
And you've always been, into the data analytics and trying to find a way. I would say now that you've jumped into, basically a full-time e-commerce focused role where your background is shopper, do you have any thoughts or advice for those maybe listening or watching in who don't have the full focus on e-com, but want to put more time and effort against it? Obviously, as percentages grow and it becomes more and more important to everyone's bottom line business at Walmart and beyond, what are some things that someone maybe doesn't have the full-time job to focus on just e-commerce can think about in addition to their brick and mortar? What can they do to kind of optimize their e-commerce flows a little bit with an ecosystem?
It's a great question, because I would say we all get really caught up in what our sort of role is and what our tasks that are, assigned to us are. But I would say my personal opinion is you can't be a great shopper marketer anymore if you don't have really good e-commerce foundational skills, right? The shoppers are telling us that's where they're going, and the data will support that. You'll see it in the numbers. So everyone's going to have to allot some time to try to catch up in that space and understand, what are the shoppers looking for? We're actioning surveys and things like that in general with Walmart shoppers to better understand how do we build the right e-commerce assortment? What are they looking for differently when they're shopping online than they're looking for when they walk into a store?
For sure.
And how do they want to shop online? What should that experience look like as we think about brand shops and as we think about how we structure our content on our item pages? We need to understand what the shoppers are looking for. And that's a shopper marketer's job. So it is very connected, whether your job is the assortment strategy and forecasting the e-commerce, maybe not. But if your job is to get shoppers to buy at Walmart, then your job is e-commerce, right? It is going to be a big part of your role. And so I think everyone's going to have to really reach out within your network. There's a lot of super smart people right in this space, especially here in Northwest Arkansas. So I've been lucky to have a lot of them that I know that work in different parts of the industry that I can tap if I have a question. I think, if you have a Walmart Connect partnership, they've got some great data and insights and thoughts around how Walmart's thinking about growing that space. And so I would say it's going to be intentionality of like, I need to dedicate time to digging into the space. And there's so much now, like studies and, things out there that you can read up on, but you'll get left behind is what I would say to anyone that's like, well, e-commerce really isn't mine. Well, it's not my role. My role is shopper. You're going to get left behind, I think, in the shopper marketing industry if you don't really just dive into the e-commerce world and understand it. I don't know that I thought I was going to dive into the level that I have. So, but now it's been great because it's a completely, developing and exciting space to be in because it is still in its infancy with Walmart.
Oh, for sure.
About it, right? Like, and it's growing fast, but it's still relatively new space.
A lot of white space.
A lot of opportunity, right? So you think about like, I think everybody could say, I'd love to be in a position where I have tons of headroom to grow and like nothing but opportunity in front of me, right? Like I think if they were giving you a role or a job description and that's the way that it was written, like, how would you like to come and be a part of an organization and you have nothing but opportunity for growth? Would you sign up for that? I think most of us probably would.
Sure, sounds great.
Yeah, the part that you might have to read the fine print is like, it's going to be the most complicated thing that you've ever had to figure out. And you're not going to have all the answers and you're going to be guessing a little bit along the way. But that's also kind of part of the fun of it. But
when I think about you, Jenny, I don't know if I would call him a retail strategist or not, but I think of Theodore Lasso. Maybe you know him as Ted. And his famous quote of "Be curious, not judgmental," right? And I think it's really easy sometimes in a bifurcated industry to go, yes, it's all about physical retail, or it's all about e-com, or it's all about pure play and what Amazon's doing, or what Kroger's doing, or what Walmart's doing. And you have to align yourself to one of the camps versus what you just talked about is this idea of exploring curiosity to go, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe there's others around me in community that is a safe place for me to phone a friend when I don't know. And it's okay to not know everything. This is not a 50-year-long industry, right? This is not like the automotive industry or insurance or when you look at some of the, or medical services, there are so many industries that are decades and decades and decades and decades, generations even, whereas this is new, right? Still, relatively speaking. And so to approach things with curiosity. And the one thing in this space that is absolutely constant is change, right? 100%. And one of the things that, I know we were talking about earlier, but I'd love for you to maybe have your perspective on is this idea of the buzzword of ChatGPT or OpenAI or Sam Altman, all the things that are going on. You were talking a little bit about, hey, as a company, maybe if we keep the shopper at the core, which we've just talked about, shopper is really, really important. Their behavior may be online historically on a retailer website versus how they currently interact with ChatGPT. That language might be different. And then therefore the implications of how our products show up and show up in those spaces, again, not because we say they're right or wrong, but that's just where people are going. Yeah. And so we need to, as brands, be there to be part of that conversation. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because I think there's also we're in this early stages of this too. So you can't just go and you see an insight and go and change your entire strategy to this, right? Because there's also a big chunk of our business that's still done in that more traditional way. And so I think that the challenging part as AI is becoming a part of everything is how do we optimize for both?
Yeah.
Right. And that is the really difficult part, I think, that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And so what we were talking about earlier is I made a joke, I think, to you, Josh, where it was like, my husband, ChatGPT runs his entire life. Helps him run his business, helps him run his day-to-day task list. There's nothing that he's trying to get a solution for that he's not leveraging AI for. Whereas I'm a bit more old school, and you would think me being the one that works in e-commerce and is, supposed to be very like technology forward, in my actual personal life, I'm like still a bit old school, just baking bread and like, just kind of trying to decompress when I go home at night. But Absolutely. I'm starting to like play around in the space because I see how beneficial it is for him and how, how much time savings and efficiencies he's getting out of it. Not to mention, it's already impacting our business and my professional life so much that I have to kind of dive in, sort of what we were talking about earlier. It's like, you have to make the time and you have to just jump in, right? And learn. So in the spirit of doing that, I've been like trying to audit and understand. And what I will say is like, I use it a lot now for like my baking. I think about just personally how I'm using it when I want to adapt a recipe because my husband's vegan and I want to make this recipe, but I need help with adapting that to allergy friendly or whatever. And it's great for things like that. So I've started realizing like the potential here is tremendous when you think about AI. And so as I've on the professional side, been in there playing around with it, the way that I talk to, or my husband talks to his AI is like a best friend or a business partner, right? Like a human.
Yep.
We prompt them in the same way. It's like, hey, chat, I'm trying to figure out this, and this, right? It's not keyword searches, right? It's not the way in which traditionally we have focused our energies around content and SEO optimizations, right? And things like that, because that's just not how you're interacting with your chat. They become a friend or like an assistant, a part of your life. And so what I'm noticing is that our content today is structured to work very well in an SEO optimized world, right? On a retailer website or out in the Google environment.
And when you say that, just because some people that are listening might not, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You're referencing like there's very specific words.
Correct.
That like a brand such as Lysol would say, we really want to own certain words like disinfecting.
Yes, right? Exactly.
And so that's kind of, if I'm showing up and going, I need something that can disinfect, Lysol wants to show up at the table.
100%. Right? Okay. And I think when we're talking about the content and how we optimize that content for those keywords that are important to our brand, when you go to Walmart.com and you click on Lysol, we'll follow that train of thought for a second. There's a product description, right? The name of the product. There's bullet points and description about the product, what it does for you, right? And then there's all this back-end attributions that we're filling in that help drive that SEO or the search engine optimization. And so that's all, we've been doing that now for a number of years. And so we have it in a pretty strong spot to be able to win against search and do some of those traditional things that we've all been doing now long enough that we feel really comfortable with it. You enter AI into the chat, and obviously Walmart's leaning in a big way with AI. It's a little bit different now because we need to rethink how we write those descriptions, how some of the human-centered language needs to start coming through more as we think about how a shopper would be talking to their AI. So I think the example I shared with you earlier that I was doing some quick audits was when I asked ChatGPT very specifically, I'm going to Walmart today and I need a product that can disinfect and clean surfaces in my house. Boom, Lysol's there, right? Because those are keywords that we have optimized our content against, right? Totally. When I say my house is a wreck, it's disgusting, and I'm going to Walmart, I got to get something to clean it, we might not show up there. Right? Because our content is not written in that way, because it's written as it should be traditionally in the traditional, e-commerce world to maximize the keywords that people are using when they're searching. And so it's a shift now in how we start to think about content, and we can't abandon, right? Totally. Because keyword and search engine optimization is still very important, right? That's probably still going to be the majority for a time anyway of how people are shopping. But we have to start to adapt and work in some of that human language, I think, to to be able to capitalize on the way people are using AI.
Totally. I mean, it's conversational is kind of the way you're talking about it. It's crazy to think you mentioned 2 years at Reckitt. It's only been 2 years. It was actually November of 2023 that OpenAI launched ChatGPT to the public. So it's crazy. It's only been 2 years. It feels like a lot longer.
Right.
But now we're in a world where, as a major brand, a Lysol Reckitt, you're thinking about how you can adapt and change your strategy from SEO still exists to GEO, to generative engine optimization. And what do you need to be able to do to kind of adapt there? As you kind of think forward a little bit into 2026 and beyond, and just think about not only search, what's the right product, but Walmart just announced they're the first retailer that's going to have a direct open partnership with OpenAI and allow checkout to happen directly in app. Like, where do you see things going? What are you thinking about trying to kind of get ahead of as it relates to shopping actually happening directly in agent and within that conversational flow?
I think it's a really exciting time. And I think it's also a bit like intimidating, right? As we think about it, because we still don't feel like we've 100% mastered e-commerce in its traditional sense. Mm-hmm. And now it's changing. Back to your point, the constant is change, right? And so it's exciting, but it's also working at lightning speed to try to make sure you understand it and that we feel like we have the right strategy in place to be able to capitalize on that. And I think we also always want to try to be thought leaders in the space, right? We have really large brands with strong historic equity in the spaces that we play in. And so there's going to be an expectation from our consumers that we will show up for them in the spaces that they want us to. And so we are like rapidly trying to figure this out and capture whatever insights and data that we can to help inform a strategy as we go into 2026, because it is moving very fast. And I would say nobody's going to get it 100% right. I think we just need to dive in and test and learn and figure out like what's going to work within our brands. It'll be interesting to see with this partnership, like how much of the true conversion starts to happen. And my biggest question marks there still is going to be the data component, right? What is that going to look like? Will we be able to track it? How will we receive that data to understand to what magnitude conversion is happening in those apps versus a click back over to a .com where we can track it in the more traditional sense? And I think those are still the question marks that exist that we have to figure out, because as we all know, we need to make sure that wherever we're putting our time and our energy, as I mentioned before, that we can justify and measure that that's the right place and the right spaces. And so there's no doubt that from a long term, that's the right place to put our energy, because that is the direction that the world is going and shoppers are going. It's a matter of how much, how fast do we need to invest in the spaces, and then how will we track success? And more importantly, what does success even look like? We need to define that. And I think that's the big question mark that, like, for my leadership and myself even, what's a good goal?
What's the baseline? Right.
What is a goal that we would want to place on this, right? Because we're starting from zero. And so, like, how do we figure out what we think the goalpost should be, and then how are we going to make sure we can measure ourselves against it? I think those are still the big areas that most people have to answer before we can fully dive in. But I think we're all going to be doing a lot of testing and learning in 2026, especially the first probably 1 or 2 quarters is going to be a ton of people just kind of getting their feet wet and diving in and testing some things to see what maybe is sticking and what's not. And then hopefully with some time, as Walmart develops out that partnership, we'll figure out the data component so that we have a way of sort of tracking the success behind it.
Well, you think of like marketing, right? Like 20 years ago, and most of the brands at Reckitt are more than 20 years old. Right. You talked about like brand architecture, visual identity. What is the emotive state that a brand stands for? What's the packaging look like? What is out of home or TV, right? Like there were very traditional kind of brand marketing 101. Then you had the introduction of social media, and brands had to then have a social voice and a tone and a how do we show up here? One of the things I think that's interesting, Josh, with what you just called out, ChatGPT, it's 2 years into the general public. So anyone that says I'm a ChatGPT expert,
right,
I would question that title because it's 2 years. Like there's probably not a whole lot of expertise. I don't think there's going to be a neurosurgeon that you're like, oh, he's an expert in neurology if he's done it for 2 years, right? And so I think giving ourselves grace and inviting open dialogue and conversations with others that might think differently about us is really important. But one of the things now with agentic or conversational commerce or agentic shopping is this idea of like, how are brands' personalities going to show up? Because it's not just, oh, can I shop? But like, how are these things going to come into this? We're all people trying to give people-centric prompts to a device that has a brand that has this visual and person, hopefully the agency or whoever created that or the brand managers right now are going, well, we want to stand for this. And here are the things that we want people to emotionally feel. Well, now that's got to come across in a form that previously hasn't had to, and so it'll be really interesting when I think about like even some of the brands that you guys have that have maybe different personality, like a KY, right? Like it's got it's in an interesting category, right? It's had different things across brand historically. How are those things going to come to life in this new channel, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's like, oh, well, we're architecting. You used that language earlier, which I really like, of like, we're starting to architect and build something, a organization for the future, a shopping experience for the future, a new channel of how people are going to interact with our brands. It's just this whole, that kind of the Aladdin whole new world, right? Not in a intimidating, there could be this analysis paralysis where we're like, well, until we know exactly, we're not going to do anything. You just said, I think 4 or 5 times, we just got to jump in. We just got to try, right?
We have to be willing to fail, but fail fast, learn from it, and then optimize and adapt. And I think the brands and organizations that are willing to do that will be the ones that win, right? I think that's, if you look at any big historic shifts in commerce, in retail, and CPG that have happened over the course of the last 20 years, those are the brands that win. The ones that are willing to take the risks, that are going to dive in. We might not know it all, but we're going to jump in, we're going to play around, we're going to test, and then we're going to learn quickly and we're going to optimize from it. I think those are the brands that will win. And I think, the ones that want to kind of sit back and wait and see it, no shade there. There's times where, I don't want to be the guinea pig either. Let's see how this goes. And so I think it's finding that balance and what makes sense for your organization and what, again, I bring it back to what are the consumers of our brands going to expect from us? And I think if we keep that at the center of everything, that should be driving most of our decisions. I think you touched on a good point, which is another very complex and stressful part of my job, is you think about the landscape of brands that I have under, Total Reckitt. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? Totally. We are going to have very specific strategies for a lot of these brands because of just the nature of the brands, the barriers that consumers have to purchase. It's the going to be very unique. Yeah,
totally.
When I think about our like upper respiratory business and brands that we have like Mucinex and Delsum and even like Airborne as an example, that urgent need as sickness is starting to be upon us, right, drives so much of my thinking and process and how I'm going to make a purchase decision, whether I'm going to go to ChatGPT because I don't know what I need for my symptoms versus whether, my doctor just told me this is what I need and I'm going to go straight to that, urgent need trip. But that thinking and that strategy has to be very unique to that consumer journey and that brand and its position in retail, whereas KY, very different, right? A very different need state. A lot of education needed in a lot of these spaces where, as I think about like our laundry business with our laundry sanitizer, it's still relatively low in terms of household penetration because there's just still a lot of education. Why do I need it? For what loads do I need to use it for specifically, right? There's still a lot of opportunity to continue to educate. And I think those are brands where, honestly, I think ChatGPT and some of this AI could really help us because I think that's where I believe consumers are going to be seeking more help and more information
from an educational perspective,
getting over a barrier and to be able to choose the right product for them. So I think it's not as simple as we have a strategy of how we're going to leverage AI with Walmart, right? We're probably going to have 10 strategies because all of our different brands are going to need something a little bit differently. And to your point earlier, like as we think about just our brand's position and the equity that our brands have, the expectation that consumers are going to have for us are going to be different depending on the brand. So it's fun in that regard because it is like it's chaotic, it's complex. There's not this like easy button of like, okay, we wrote the strategy, now we set it and forget it, right? It's like we wrote a strategy for this one, now how do we adapt and what would we do differently for the other brands? So it's a fun time to be in e-commerce, I will say.
It has been, it continues to evolve over these 10 years. And you talk about like, chaotic, but also you mentioned like being the guinea pig. And I think like knowing you over the years, it feels like you've always been the guinea pig. You want to jump in and find a way to challenge and try new things. It does. I love seeing it though. In that lens, if you think back over your years, like what's one of your favorite campaigns that you've done over time that maybe has been trying out something new, doing something different, going against the grain, using that data mindset? I feel like as I think about Jenny, those are things that kind of like summarize you of always trying new things and pushing boundaries, but using data as a way to measure and optimize. Like anything pop to mind is like a favorite time that you've done that?
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I've tried to always be like, it's a fine balance, right? Where it's like, I want to be a leader. I want to be, driving and testing and learning, but not at the expense of like doing what we believe is right. And so it's results, always been, I've been trying to find always that balance of like, I need some insights that tell me this is the right direction to go. And then I need a way to measure it after the fact, but I want to dive in and I want to play and test and learn and do all the things. But, one of them, because you brought up KY, which is funny, this has been years and years ago, and Breakdown was actually part of the program that we did where it was the first time we built out a dual path, we'll call it shopper journey for KY, right? Because it was for Valentine's Day. And we took a step back to think about the occasion of Valentine's Day, 2 people involved, right? You've got 2 people in a relationship or, a date or something that might be, happening. And the shopping journey for him looks very different than the shopping journey for her as we think about that occasion.
Yeah.
And so we outlined those paths within one shopper journey of, as I think about him, for him, it's all about like, how do I need to get a gift for her. I need this, right? Like there was very specific tasks that he has within that journey to get to the end result, which is the Valentine's Day night, right? Yeah. For her, it's, it's very different. What am I going to wear? I need to plan the date, right? So they have very different sort of paths that they're on as they're planning for the end result, which is Valentine's Day night. So we built a program specifically to that, an activation using technology. I know with break time. So we had a quiz and we targeted men and women very differently across the activation. For him, he was able to design a custom card that he could then print for her as part of his gift and get a recommendation. We did a movie. I think we did like a movie tie-in with movie tickets. So it was like stay home. And it was our like version of a Netflix and chill back when it was first coming out. When you think about that, it was like, date night kind of in and let KY kind of facilitate what's most important, which is time together and the coupling or what have you. But it was really fun because it was a way to really like, it would be really easy as a brand to just put out your brand marketing for the occasion and be like, you need to check them out. We did Valentine's Day. For us, it was like, who are we talking to? And it's not as simple as there's one person buying in this category for this occasion, right? You have multiple shoppers and they're playing different roles within the occasion. So that one was a really fun one because I think it was another space where we were like, let's just test a little bit. Let's play around and see like, what do the guys do different than the females when we talk to them about the occasion of Valentine's Day? And so it was a fun one. And then I think I've done some time in food as well. We did a really fun like recipe oriented holiday approach when I was at Campbell's. And that one was really fun because it was all about user generated content. And then it was a matter of like, how do we create a hub for that? And we built out, where you could customize and find recipes specific to whatever it was that you were interested in. And they were all created by influencers. And so that I think about a lot was a really fun way to leverage influencers and social and content creation. And that's very, authentic and organic. And not brand developed this recipe in a test kitchen and now we're telling you should make it, right? But it was very much like your peers, like other humans, right? Love these
relatable.
recipes, and they don't look perfect like they were made in a test kitchen. They look like you made them with your kids for the holidays or whatever, which was really fun. And I know you hit on that, Brad, but like social commerce as over the last even 3-4 years is such a huge part of, it should be a huge part of every brand strategy as we think about like, that's where consumers are going and they no longer want that like heavily branded voice all the time, right? Totally. Like they're looking for that human centric, back to what we talked about with AI, with everything else. Like they want to feel connection to what they buy. And I think we're always trying to figure out, you know, how do we give them that connection while still maintaining our brand voice and integrity of the brand? And, you know, it's a fine balance that you're always trying to play of like, there's very specific things about our brand we want to make sure is coming through because we know it's really important to driving that conversion, but also that they don't want us to just talk at them anymore, right? They want to feel a part of it. They want to be engaged with, and they want to feel represented in your brand, and they want to see other people using it. And so it's, no, that was a long-winded answer.
No,
that's
those
great. Are the activations I get really excited about, and I think that inherently drive more of that e-commerce engagement too, because they lean very digitally, but create an experience in a way, you know, digitally for our consumers, so that they want to buy our brands.
Totally. We talked a lot about digital today, but let's go analog for a moment. And it's a number of things you've kind of mentioned throughout, but you were talking about authentic recipes. You also mentioned baking bread earlier and trying new things. But as a marketer, you know, it's always fascinating to see what you're into, but you've developed a little bit of a side hustle that kind of touches on some of these themes that leave it. Would love to quickly learn a little more about what's happening in your world in baking.
Yeah. Well,
because you're not just Jenny from Reckitt or Jenny on the block, right? You're Jenny the baker. Yes, chef.
Yes,
so
chef.
I'd love to hear
Chef
more about Chef Jenny.
That's what I hear that at home all the time now. It's funny because my first side hustle started with the podcast that my husband and I started, which I know you guys know about too, which was more of just a way to like fun. Like again, as I'm always trying to like crack the code and figure out these spaces that the world is going into. And my husband says I'm a little late to most of the trends, which is okay. In my work life, I have to be the guinea pig, but like in my personal life, sometimes I want to like wait a minute,
hold back
see how this goes. But we had started a podcast, which was really fun, and then we kind of took a hiatus from that and took a break because we were moving and doing a lot of things. So I was a Girl Scout troop leader for my daughter and her troop for like 10, 12 years, and all my girls graduated last year, which was awesome. And they, you know, went off to college. And so then I was like, okay, what am I going to do that's for Jenny, right? That's not just my job, but like, and so the bread baking came about selfishly because I have developed over the years, like a lot of food, you know, issues and have an autoimmune disease. And so like I stopped eating gluten a couple years ago, which is for anybody on that journey. I apologize because I've been there. I know Leslie deals with that too. Luckily, I don't have celiac, so I kind of stumbled upon sourdough as like I had heard from a lot of people the process of fermentation and all of that you could still tolerate it because it helps break down the gluten. Like, I'm just going to try. I'm going to see if I can do this.
Dabble.
I'm going to dabble a little. I got into the like sourdough TikTok pretty heavily, and I was like, this looks like I could do this. And then now it's like exploded. The 6 months later, it's like become my entire personality, to quote Taylor Swift, I think, which is like, I'm pretty much talking about bread all the time.
You're in your sourdough era.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah,
I think you brought a box in, so we can take a look at it.
Let's
see what we got. I've been hearing all about this.
I know. Josh asked me when I come to town, I need some bread. So this is
amazing.
Artisan sourdough.
It is artisan. Look at that. You have a leaf like kind of baked into that design.
So good. Wow. The designs.
It's amazing.
Yeah, double fermented, so it helps break down the gluten and the sugar, so it's healthier for your gut. Sourdough is just like, first of all, it just tastes really good. Yeah. But second of all, it's just healthier for you. And there's 4 ingredients in this bread. 4 ingredients. So that's what my mom came home the other day with store-bought bread. And I was like,
womp womp. Who do you think you are? Not allowed in this house.
What's that?
I'll make you whatever you want.
I said, flip that over. Let's read the ingredients, right? And so like it's now become like my personal mission to get more and more people to eat healthier bread because I feel better. My husband is like, was in sports his whole life growing up and played, college, whatever. And so now he has like old sports injuries that as we're getting older, he's getting like arthritis, inflammation. And so even for him, he doesn't have the gluten intolerance and some of the stuff that I do, but he's like, I just feel better.
Totally.
So he's loving it. So it's become like my whole family is just all in. My daughters and I've turned my dining room into a bakery at our house.
Wow. And where can people, for those that aren't local area, where can they find you? Can they check you out online? Like how do we find your company?
It's called Crust and Crumb Sourdough Co. I'm on all the socials now, so you can find me on TikTok is probably where I post like just the chaos of me making all the sourdough and the just wreck of my kitchen and all of that fun stuff. So you can probably find more stuff on TikTok, but yeah, I get a lot of orders now. I do a little porch stand in our neighborhood. So every week I'm stocking the little porch stand and the neighbors come flocking. And it's been really fun to get to play around with recipes. And I also think we're creatives. Like those of us that have been in this world, in the marketing world for so long are like, creative is just, it becomes a part of you. And so not that e-commerce is not creative, it's creative strategy and creative thinking, but I no longer build like creative marketing plans. I'm not reviewing key visuals and some of those things that I used to do in my old life. So this has been
scratching that itch.
Some of that like creativity, like play around with recipes and try different things. So it's been a lot of fun.
Amazing. Well, you're perfectly summarizing it with just like commerce and humans bringing things together and coming up with new concepts and ideas, but really appreciate all the amazing thoughts and insights today on our first ever guest on Break Time Off the Shelf.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for being on.
Thanks for picking me to be first. A guinea pig. Look at me.
You always are, as you said.
Living it out. Living the dream. Living the dream.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks for all the support too.
Well, and I think that's something that as a company, which I know is we are a tech company that care deeply about human beings. And I think that often the tech industry has become inhuman in a lot of regards. And so even by doing your side hustle of your bread and us being able to participate in that and take bread to our clients and people that they can then have bread with their families and friends. It's like going, hey, in this world of technology and the world of AI and all of the things that it brings to the table, what it doesn't bring is true human connection, like sitting across someone that's a dear friend or a family member at the table, having sourdough toast.
Breaking bread.
Breaking bread with Break Time has become a thing, and you're a huge part of that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I love that you guys, it seems like over the years, no matter what I do, you guys always just dive in with me and like, how can we support the podcast? Your team was like, let's help you make a logo, right? Like you guys have just always been, there to support whatever crazy thing I'm doing.
Well, who knows what's next?
It's a mutual feeling. Excited to follow it.
But yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm big fans of you guys, obviously. The work that you do is exceptional. And the humans that you guys have at Break Time are just,
thank you.
Great.
Appreciate that.
Some of my favorites.
Awesome. Well, excited to see where you take things next year, and we'll have to check in the future. But thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.